moved to Carrollton from Farmers Branch in 1942. I was about 8 years old, and my dad was a farmer. And so we came to Carrollton to manage a farm for Mr. Tom Field, who owned the land that we lived on. And Mother worked as a housewife and took care of everything in the house, and Dad took care of the yard and the house, the fields, and they grew wheat and corn wheat and cotton and oats, and they had a cow, and I don't recall if we had any horses then, but chickens, and so it was just a typical farm. It was about 1942 is when we moved from Farmers Branch. We lived on Forest Lane, and then Mr. Fields wanted us to manage this other farm. So we moved to Carrollton, and that's where we stayed. We loved Carrollton. There were good memories. I can't recall bad memories. Of course, we could sometimes block those out if we wanted to. But I was the last of 8 children, and my brothers were all older. So I was, there was one that was 7 years older than me. And so they were, for the most part, they were doing their thing, and I was the baby, and so I got a lot of attention from Mom and Dad, and we did everything together. I remember so much about the square, and about that was the place to be, and just driving down and sitting on the square, looking at people passing by, and going around shopping and visiting with friends on Saturday afternoon, going to the Plaza Theater. That was even before it was where it is now. It was over on the west side of the square, a little bitty place, but Mr. and Ms. Lowry had it then, and I remember doing, that on that Saturday afternoon, going to church on Sunday. Everybody went to church then. Wasn't like it is now. And people came in, that's where they came to get their supplies. Their groceries and medicine and everything that they had to have, and just get to be with people, because they were hard workers and they worked 5 and 6 days a week. And so Saturday afternoon was the time to be there. Oh yeah, the war affected us a lot. It affected everyone. I had 3 brothers that were in the service. Amos was in the Coast Guard, James was in the Navy, and Charles was in the Army. And thank the Lord, they all came back safely. It was a hard time. Because I was young, I probably didn't realize a lot of it, but I knew something of the rationing, and I knew that you save the tinfoil off of your gum, and the little things that a child could do. Well, I was right in there doing that, because everybody was, and it was a team effort. We knew while those boys were fighting that we had to keep things going at home, so we saved everything we could, and just got what we could when the rationing was. I don't recall people cheating on that. That was the way you just tried to do the right thing and help those boys as they were over there fighting for us, for our freedom. The blue stars were in a lot of windows. But when there was a gold one that appeared, that was devastating. The gold one was when a person there in that house had died on the battlefield. And it was devastating to the whole community. We all took that loss as if it was, because it was a family. It was a family member in our city. And we all shared in that grief. I can still remember some of the people that had lost loved ones, and how my family grieved along with them. Well, the church was a center of course. Like I say, everyone went to church, and it was when there was a revival at one of the churches, most all other churches would turn out one night or two and go to that church. And the Methodist church and the Christian church and the First Baptist and then Union Baptist Church was the one that we went to. It was on Beltline. It later was changed to College Avenue Baptist Church, and then it moved up to Josie Lane. And but we had we were in, as I said, Union Baptist Church, and there were just a lot of things that went on, and we were all a part of that. Even, though we lived out of town. We actually lived out east of town where, let me see, it was, I don't know how many miles, a couple of 3 miles out. But when we came into town, well, that was a big deal, because we were, and to ride the bus, the school bus, well, I had to walk up to the end of, up to Beltline to catch that bus, and it was an old, I can remember it being squared off, and it looked like a cracker box, and that's what we called it, the cracker box, and rode into town to go to school. And but churches and school were the center of everything, and there was a time we had parades down on the square. Always the parades. There would be horses and would be floats. We built floats in high school, to ride in those floats, and would walk a long way when we were when you were walking on those parades. And they still do that. I think they still have parades downtown. I went to first grade in Farmers Branch Elementary, which was on Valley View Lane, and is no longer there. Then I moved out there to east of town. I started going to the red brick building, which was the first through the 8th grade. We didn't have a middle school. And then when you finished the 8th grade, you walked across the sidewalk to Carrollton High School. It was DeWitt Perry. It had that sign on the front, but it was Carrollton High School. That was what it was named. That was the name for years until they moved to over to where Turner is now, and then they changed it to Earl Turner. He was my superintendent when I was in school, and Dale Davis was the principal of high school. E.L. Kent was a teacher that I had in, I think, 7th or 8th grade. He taught part of that time. And all these people have schools named after him now. But, excuse me, the elementary school, the neat things I can remember about that was it was a 2-story brick building and had a basement. And you just don't see basements in this part of the country. But we had a basement. That was where the cafeteria was. And there was a little snack bar there that Mary Fike ran. We called her Aunt Mary. Aunt Mary Fike's little snack bar. And so if we had any extra money, we could go in there. Of course, I took my lunch all the time. I didn't know you could buy your lunch. I was just, Mother fixed it and I took it. So that's another thing that I was just talking to someone else about. The fact that we just did what our parents said. And a lot of times, we didn't question it a whole lot. It was just the way it was. And kids nowadays, they have to question everything, which that's okay, I guess, but to a degree. But there was a respect there. And I revered my parents. Just, it was a healthy reverence for them. I just knew that they knew better, and I tried to follow their lead. But talking about the school, after I graduated from 8th grade, and remember we had a little graduation, a little banquet, and my mother made my dress for the little banquet, and I still have that dress someplace, but because she made all my clothes for me, and was a very good seamstress. Then we went over to high school, and I love school. we had home ec, and I didn't like history, now I do. There's so many things that you wish you had listened more, but I loved home ec. I loved to cook. Never did like to sew, but, my mother sewed, so why did I need to? But I loved school and enjoyed the interaction with the kids. I was cheerleader, and loved that, because with this big mouth, I could get people's attention. And so I enjoyed that very much. Then married my high school sweetheart, and he was a football player, and he graduated the year before me. And then he went on to war in Korea was going on then. And he went to San Antonio for basic training. Then he never did have to go overseas, but we were married at the end of my senior year. I was just a baby, but but that's what we did.
When was that?
1953. I graduated in 1953, married then, and then like in 1957 started our family, and they were raised in Carrollton, Farmers Branch, and just a little ways over here, across the way, we lived, and so Josie Ranch was a big thing to us. We used to have barbecues on the 4th of July at Josie Ranch. It was a working ranch then, and had the pond out there and little lake, and then it was a big deal when they had the 4th of July barbecue. There was cars there. There are pictures in the senior center of those rodeos and all, and it's really interesting to see those and see the cars. There were hundreds of cars around the area where, just up here on Josie Lane. It was a real ranch, working ranch. Mr. Josie owned it, and there was across the road from it, for a while there was buffalo, and then for a while there were longhorns, and that was a real draw for people to drive out from Dallas to come out and see. Of course, Josie Lane was just a 2-lane road then, and all the activity was on this side of the road, and then on the other side is where they had the cattle and the buffalo and all kinds of things like that. But it was there wasn't a Keller Springs road then that crossed Josie, and there just was so much that wasn't here that it's hard to tell a new person how it really was. Every July 4th, we had that barbecue, and I didn't. It was just a lot of excitement to me. I didn't ever have to worry about having any money because Mother and Dad took care of that, but that was a big deal. I can't remember how long they had it, how many years, or if I went every year, but I just know that wherever Mother and Daddy went, I tagged along, and it was a special time. I've worked ever since I was 12 years old. I didn't even have a Social Security card. As you know, there was a lot of like driver's license. I didn't get my driver's license till we were living in San Antonio when I was about 21 years old. But, part of the time out here, my dad was constable, and so everybody drove without a license if they had, if they wanted to. But I worked at Hall's Rexall Drug Store. I worked for a while at Roten's Dry Goods Store. I worked for a while at a variety store, which is, of course, no longer there. And let me see, where else did I work? I guess that was the main places that I worked. But Roten's Dry Goods Store was on the west side of the square then. And there was a flood. Has anybody talked to you about the flood? Mm-hmm. I think it was in 1946 and 47 are the ones that my brother really recall more than I do. But he said there was a dam that broke up someplace, and so it made the city of Carrollton flood. And I remember the water being up over the sidewalks, and the sidewalks were up high, and that there was a lot of damage in the stores. And everybody went down there to help, to get to, just to get the products out of the water and try to get them dry or move things up, or to help with a sale. They had a flood sale after that, and everybody helped. There was none of this pilfering things or going in and stealing things when there was distress. Everybody just helped. And I remember that camaraderie and the way that people came to each other's aid. That just marked me as a young person, that people were supposed to help each other in bad times and in good times. And I'm thankful I was raised in an environment like that, because that's something you never forget. You live by that. G.B. Chambers owned that ice house, as far as I can remember. And it was just a little place, but every once in a while, whoever was working there, they'd chip off a piece of that ice, because the ice was blocks. And they'd chip off a piece of that and hand it out to you. And oh boy, I love that. And it was a small place, but inside they had a little place where they had bread and milk, I think, and some things like that, because nothing was open on Sunday. But you could go down there on Sunday, and part of the time they'd be open for you to get stuff like that. It was, because everything was closed on Sunday. You just didn't, you got your gas on Saturday, and you did your grocery shopping on Saturday and all that. In Farmers Branch, we had an ice box, and the iceman would come to our house. And I remember those big old tarps that they would throw across those, and then the ice was kind of, there was crevices where you could chip off 100 size block, or 50 or 25. And our ice box wasn't very large, so Mother would have to, they would have to chip off a small and put that in that ice box. I cannot recall not having a refrigerator after we moved to Carrollton. Seems to me like we had one out east of town, but we may have had an ice box for a while. When we moved into Carrollton on Broadway, when Dad and Mr. Gentry built the first house that my family owned, and it was on Broadway Street out north of the square, about a mile from the square, because I walked it many times. And we had some land. We had purchased some land, and Mr. Gentry and Dad and I don't know who all else built that house. And that was the first house that Mother and Daddy ever owned. But that was a special. I think I was about 12 when we moved there. And then, of course, I was on the other side, so I rode a bus, but it was a different bus, to get to school, because it was about 2 miles or more, because we'd ride. It'd go down to almost to the square, to Beltline, and then turn north on Beltline and go up to the school, which was on the left up in Carrollton High School. What did we do for fun? Rode bicycles. I had a bicycle. I never had a girl's bicycle. My brothers finished with theirs and handed it down to me. So I had this old rusty red maroon-colored bike that I rode all over the town. And there was no fear. I mean, we didn't have the fear. And then I walked to town after I got to where I thought I was too big to ride the bike. I'd walk down to the square, and I got in the most trouble one time when I wore shorts downtown to the square and was walking around the square, and someone told my daddy, and ooh boy, that was not a good thing. I did not wear those shorts anymore, and I could wear them when we were in a at a picnic or something, going to the lake, something like that. But you didn't wear them downtown to march around the square. That was kind of a, no-no. And so I didn't do it anymore. There again came that respect, that healthy respect. I never got a spanking from my dad. Dad never spanked me. Mother did a few times, but I just knew not to do the things when Dad told me. Anything that the church had, like picnics and reunions and homecomings, they called them, were always special. And then at the square, on the square, when they would have a parade, and that was usually maybe at the end of school or homecoming. Homecoming was in the schools were always a special time. It was usually a all-day event, and they would have the parades that went downtown, and everybody was there, and that was a special thing. But just it didn't take much to be a picnic or a special event for us. We played Richardson.
Who were your rivals?
Garland, Richardson, Highland Park. Oh my goodness, Highland Park was because they had the money and we didn't. They had these cute little uniforms, and part of ours were homemade. Mother made my skirt. The first both years that I was cheerleader, she made my skirt. One year we had to buy a sweater, that had a megaphone across the front with a C. But the next year she made my shirt and my pants and my little short skirt, and I've still got them. I saved them all these years as your wife. Oh, that's funny. I can't wear it anymore, remarkably. But this top I can, but not the bottom. But that was really special. I was thrilled to be honored as a cheerleader. That was a real honor to me. It wasn't all the ones that were cheerleaders or majorettes or anything like that. That was a real honor, but we worked for it. We tried out, and some of them could have been a popularity thing, but because I couldn't tumble or anything like that, but I could sure yell loud and jump high then, and so that got me in. And so it was fun. It was an honor to be able to cheer for our football team. There was a man by the name of Judge Ramsey that was a big figure in the city, and the Blantons were fine people. They my dad was a kind of a unique person. He was not. We never did have any money, but we had pride, and we had in that we knew everybody. We knew the person that was on the other side of the tracks, and we knew the ones that were important and had money. And they were all, my dad treated everybody the same, and we didn't, while we had a service station there, if there were people that didn't have money to get gas, he would help them with that, But then on the other hand, the people that had money, we knew them and they knew us, and we held them in high esteem. Holman Roten was a fine man he had the funeral home, and I babysat for some of the Rotens, or the kids in the old funeral home, and I've seen them to this day, and we laugh about that. They don't remember it. I don't remember it, but I know I did it. So, and then there were people like Bear Young that had a grocery store, Mr. Good that had the drugstore, the Sewells that owned the little variety store, the Godfreys, the Rotens, the Lowrys, the Gravleys. Oh my goodness, there were so many people that had such an impact on my life. And of course, the pastor of my church, and those that we loved in our church, and other churches too. They had a great impact. And our teachers, we had some great teachers then. Miss Dent and Miss Ogle. She was, if she was alive today, she could tell you all this a lot better than I could because she knew all this. She wrote Elm Fork Settlement books that should be here in the library about the early days in Carrollton. The Myers, and I understand a couple of the Myers boys are going to be interviewed, and their grandparents were people that I knew and that we knew, and so there was just a lot that were. I can't even begin to name them all that were instrumental in my life and in the life of our community. I think the pride and the that you have in your community and in your the way you're raised and the way your friends were raised. We were all, none of us had a lot, but our values were so embedded in us. I mean, they were there. And we didn't have to ask a lot of questions about, I didn't always follow those values. No, I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things that I'm not proud of. But I knew the right thing, and I revere those people that lived and really had tough times before that started this community. There were people that started the church that I'm in now, First Baptist Church, in 1909 that were people that I can remember their names now. And we recently, of course, celebrated that 100th year. And their names are, I know of the legacy that those people had and how they gave to missions, and that's a big part of my life even now, and gave me a love for missions in foreign countries and in our own area. And I just I'm thankful that I was raised in this area. I love Carrollton. I love the small town feel. As it's gotten bigger, I can go to the grocery store now and not see a single person that I know. Well, you went to the grocery store when I was a kid, and everybody was there. You spent a lot of time there because you visited with everybody. Occasionally at Walmart, I'll see people that I know, but it's not the same. But I giving that, I still wouldn't trade it. I want to finish my life up in Carrollton. I started here. Why move? Why not stay here? It was. My children have gone through school here. They started out at Good Elementary School, and they went to DeWitt Perry Middle School, and then R.L. Turner High School. That was before Newman Smith was. And one of them still lives here. His children went through Furneaux and Long, and then Newman Smith, because they live in that area. And the other one moved away, so he's all the way to Keller. Yeah, but he loved Carrollton. He still loves Carrollton. He was a chaplain for the police force for a while, and loved doing that. And it was a big force for the government here in Carrollton. That was back when Milburn Gravely was the mayor, and he and Milburn were trade stories, and they were good friends, So my children have a healthy respect for this area and love art. I guess being a part of a church that was special to us, and the people that were there that I looked up to, and just having good friends. Oh my, we had so many good friends. We used to, as we got older, we'd go places together, and it wasn't a date, it was just a whole lot of, and it was usually kids from the church that we went with. and I enjoyed that. We used to have slumber parties. The girls, we'd have about 8 or 9 of us, have a slumber party, and that was always fun. So I don't know that I could pin it down to just one thing, but all those things were important, and just being a part of the community that I was raised in. My dad had a service station right off the square, and I remember they had, it was called a Whitlock service station. I believe was the name of it, yeah. And people would, all kinds of people stop there, and shoot the breeze and get $1 worth of gas, because gas was so cheap then. And I remember trying to wipe off the windshield, and I wasn't quite tall enough, to do that. But I loved to be down there with my daddy doing that, There was, and then, of course, they sold candy and stuff like that, and so I could, get in on that. And it was off the square. It was actually north. It was on Broadway, and it was kind of across from where the ice house was. Yeah, that's where I got to go get my ice every once in a while. I was across there. One of the things that I think is interesting, I think you're going to interview Paul Price. Now, this is the kind of a church and a community that we had. When my dad was sick in his later years, he always went to Red Price's barbershop, which was just around the square. It was on Broadway also then. And but it got to be where he couldn't go anymore. And he had, Red Price came to my mother's and daddy's house up on East Russell. By then they moved to East Russell, and cut his hair. Now that's the kind of people that we had in our city, and there was just nothing that people wouldn't do for each other. That stands out in my memory, and I don't know if Paul knows about that. He probably does, but just I could talk all day about the things that I could remember that people did for you, and I just that stands out in my memory. That there was a little cafe that was called End of the Road Cafe, and that was on the corner of Beltline and Broadway. Of course, there wasn't a lot of stuff there anymore, but that was there. Then there was a Godfrey's department store was kind of across from that service station where we were, and then it moved up onto what we called Highland Village, and there was an A&P, or no, not an A&P. I don't remember. There was a grocery store there for a while, and then later there was another grocery store there, and I can just there was just bits and pieces that I can remember of things as they changed, but always the camaraderie and the friendliness and people, and you might have known all about them, but that was just the way it was. We stuck to our own business, but yet we were there to help people when we could, and that's we valued that. And I think that's my brothers. I never knew anything about my brother's business. After they married and moved away from home, I didn't know whether they had $1 or they had thousands. That wasn't important to us. Money was not the thing that you valued anybody by. But but I knew that if they needed anything and that they could, Dad would help them if he had it. But then when people married and moved away from home, they didn't come back and hang around the house. They come back to visit or to help Daddy with something if they needed it. But they were on their own. They built their family and started, out on their own. And they always did that. And never occurred to us that after we married that we could come back home. That was, you're on your own now. So there wasn't a lot of that boomerang effect like there is now. I hope we just can encapsulate all this for our future generation. They just don't know about how things were. I'm trying to write that down for my grandchildren. I have 14 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, going on 5. And I'll be 78 in October, so I'm just wanting all this stuff to be handed down so that they'll know what we did when we were kids and how fun it was.